freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's Scottish Open. Joining me to break it all down, Greg DuCharme is here. Hey, Greg.
Rick, I hope everything's going well for you. This is an exciting little stretch in the schedule here. A 2-week stretch, the Scottish Open, the Open Championship. We get a look at some links golf, little coffee golf on the PGA Tour. I've really enjoyed this event for a long time, but especially now that it's co-sanctioned with the PGA Tour.
Yes, so we'll talk about that in just a second, but there is a lot of golf this week. There's the Scottish Open, there's an alternate field event, the ISCO Championship, there's a Corn Ferry event, there's a senior event, there's a live golf event, there's a major next week, Greg. This is giving me the warm and fuzzies.
Yeah, time to get busy. If you're a professional golfer and you're not playing this week, you're missing out on something. So, hopefully you get somewhere to play because there's plenty of options and they happen to be good ones. The ISCO Championship's always good too. That used to be the Barbasol.
That's right.
So they play in Kentucky. So that's a good event as well. But all the attention for tonight on the Scottish Open.
Can you think of, I was thinking about this earlier. Kentucky has had 2 events this year. Okay. One was a major and one was an alternate field event. So neither were just like a regular tour stop. I cannot think that there's any other state in which that could possibly be true.
Well, no. I mean, think about where the other opposite field events are. There's one in California, right? Yeah. The Barracuda. California has too many events for that ever to be the case.
Yeah.
You got Puerto Rico. You're not going to ever get a major there. The Dominican Republic, you're never going to get a major there. So, and what other ones are there? I mean, Bermuda has been before. You're not going to get a major there.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're ever going to put an opposite field event in Scotland or Georgia.
you know who also might not get a major again? Just Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how that all plays out. But it's a good point. This may be the last year it ever happens.
Anyway, that is a conversation for a different day. We are focusing indeed on the Genesis Scottish Open. Troy, if you want to share my screen, I've got the scorecard, which is really seemingly a photocopy of a scorecard, which is what we have here, Greg. And this is, as they like to call it, the Renaissance Club. It is a par 70, 6,600 meters, which is about 7,200 yards. And we can get into, the kind of the history of this, Greg, because it's 2 years. This will be the 3rd year that it's been the PGA Tour co-sanctioned event, but this event and this golf course have been used on the DP World Tour as well.
Yes. So 5 years previous, this will be the 6th year at the Renaissance Club, which I guess we're going with that. I was never sure. Renaissance, we'll go Renaissance.
Yeah.
And like you said, par 70, 7,200 yards. So it does play pretty long, which is interesting. A healthy portion of approach shots come from outside of 175 yards, about half. 70% come from outside of 150. So that is some serious length. The fairways are also on the narrow side, and they are among the most difficult to hit on the PGA Tour. But, a little different from last week at the John Deere Classic and some other major championship venues, some of the other venues like Royal Liverpool we saw last year for the Open. There's a much smaller penalty for missing those fairways, assuming it's not extremely errant. There is a pretty big penalty when you get outside of the 3-inch cut of fescue rough. But other than that, you kind of have it seems to favor distance, especially you look at these past winners like Rory and Xander. And then when it was on the DP World Tour, you have Min-Woo Lee as well. You got 3 pretty heavy hitters in the last 3 renditions of the Scottish Open here.
Yeah, and one of the past winners, Aaron Rye, is now playing like the best golf of his career. So I'm sure we're going to talk about that plenty. So this I always kind of like to put these 2 weeks together. It's not that these guys are using this week to prepare for next week, because this is a big event in its own right. But you do see tend to see, especially with the co-sanctioned nature of this, a lot more guys who primarily play on the DP World Tour. A lot more guys, Greg, who are going to try to play a different style of golf. You know, they're not necessarily going to play the American all through the air target golf. They're going to show their chops around the greens. I just like that when we get over here for a couple weeks to really see that in action.
Yes, and it has proved to be extremely valuable. You know, Rick, I think of Colin Morikawa 2 years ago before playing his first Open. This was a real important test for him. He couldn't get his clubs to react the right way going through the turf over here, and he got used to it and made a quick adjustment and was able to win at Royal St. George's. So it is definitely at least partly a tune-up for the Open Championship, but like you said, it's a big time event for both DP World Tour players and PGA Tour players. It's very important in the schedule. So to say that it's a tune-up may be true, but it doesn't mean that this doesn't mean anything. It's just your first look at a very different style of golf with much slower greens.
Yeah.
The greens are big. They're undulating. You get winds. It's possible, and I would say likely, that you get winds you're not accustomed to seeing at most venues in the U.S., at least not the last 3 weeks on the PGA Tour. So it's different.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned the slow greens, because I was looking through my database and I had them last year at a 9. Is that possible? Or is that's, I mean, I know it's possible, but sometimes when I see something that out of the ordinary, I'm like, oh man, is that a typo? Is there a data issue that has come up? But I had him as a 9 last year.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what happened to that kind of detail, but it does make sense because they're typically like 10.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I read this year, they're expected to be around 10.
Okay.
Last year, the winds were very high. You remember the shot Rory had to hit from 200 yards. He took his 2-iron and flighted it, which is a 260 club, and it ended up right next to the hole. So that's obviously a very significant wind, and if the greens get too fast, they become unplayable. So they definitely have a tendency of being slower.
And what do you think the average is on the PGA Tour, like 12?
I think that's a pretty fair average, 11 and a half or 12.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, depending on the surface type. But, you're with those Bermuda greens and all the new variations of Bermuda grasses that they have now on the PGA Tour, they have gotten a whole lot faster.
Yeah, certainly have. Okay, well, we are going to jump into this field and start at the top and work our way down. No Scotty Scheffler in the Scottish Open field, but plenty of other names. We'll start with that after a quick word from our partners. And we're back. Here's my website, rickrungood.com, and this is the cheat sheet. There are 4 golfers, Greg, over $10,000. Rory McIlroy, the defending champion, leads us off at $11,900. Xander Schauffele, who won this 2 years ago, is $11,700. Then a gap to Ludwig Oberg at $10,500 and Colin Morikawa at $10,300. Lots to discuss up here at the top of the board.
There is a lot to discuss, and I think you have to start the conversation with Rory McIlroy, because this is a complicated one. I mean, you look at his record after the Masters, you have back-to-back wins, T12, T4, T15, second. It looks pretty darn good all the way across the board. He's your defending champion here. I mean, if you just started getting into the game of golf now and looked at this resume, you would say, okay, well, how do you not play this guy? But he's coming off of that second place finish at the U.S. Open is heartbreaking. It's a terrible loss in a tournament that he should have won, and it's had an effect on him. What kind of effect is that going to have on his game? I'm willing to play Rory at this point, Rick. I think it's worth the chance. I also just think he's good enough where if he is a little like heartbroken, he can still come out here and win the golf tournament. So I tend to lean pro Rory in this case.
I agree with you. If Rory was sulking around Jupiter, I think that's long gone. I think he's going to step out of the course on Thursday and be the second best player in the world on a golf course that sets up really well for him with a lot of good vibes and another crack at an Open Championship and a major championship next week. I find it hard to believe that he's going to have some U.S. Open hangover of something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess rust could be an issue, but it's only 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't take a month off. He didn't disappear. It's 3 weeks. Scotty Scheffler is going to take 3 weeks off before the Open. We're not going to say that he's going to be rusty.
No.
You know, I mean, I hope we don't say that.
I won't.
Yeah, I tend to think Rory's worth playing. And if you are worried about that kind of thing, I think Xander's also very worth playing.
Yeah, so here's Xander, you know, after the win at the PGA Championship, he goes T8 at the Memorial, T7 at the US Open, T13 at the Travelers, gains basically ball striking in all of those. He had a little bit of a hiccup at the Memorial and still finished inside the top 10. So this is business as usual for our 2022 champ.
Yeah, and it seemed, I mean, since he won the PGA, it seemed quiet. Like he hasn't been right there in the mix with a chance to win, but his performances have been phenomenal, as you just listed those off. Really strong performances consistently. He's been consistent long before the win at the PGA Championship as well. He's been consistent his entire career. I think it's another place. Obviously, he's a winner here as well. It's another place that suits his game very well. And he is, if you played Rory or you wanted to play Xander, I don't really know if I can decide between the two. I think they're both very, very good plays.
The other two, Ludwig Oberg and Colin Morikawa, are just as equally as interesting, and they're at a pretty significant discount. Ludwig is $1,200 cheaper than Xander, and then Colin is $200 cheaper than that. I want to go down to Morikawa first here, Greg, because since the Masters, Colin is a top 4 player in the world. He's doing it in a way that looks very Colin-esque. The putter has been unbelievable, and now we go to slower greens, which I think help the guys who are generally below average, even though he's been good. I mean, this looks like a profile that is ready to win.
It does. You know, you're almost surprised that he hasn't won already. Yeah. The one thing that I find interesting about him, and this is not a wind player thing, right? But I just wonder about is the Open Championship win at Royal St. George's artificially making him look like a links player when, you know, here he's got a T71 and a missed cut at the Scottish Open. His record at the Open after winning hasn't been great. Do you think that this form is enough to overcome with one exception, a weak record in links?
It is interesting. Yeah, I think so. I don't have any reason. I'm never going to be able to back that up with anything tangible, but I just look at this as a golfer who has their entire game together. And I also think that it's a bizarrely top heavy field, Greg, because you get a lot of the great PGA Tour players because, you know, they're going over for the Open Championship, but half this field is guys that are not playing on the PGA Tour regularly. And they're playing at a very, very high level, but I think it's a very top heavy field for being a full field. And I think Colin is like ready to just snap off again.
Yeah, I think that kind of possibility is very real. Now, the hard thing for Colin is the price point, because it's really hard for me to pass on Rory or Xander. That would be the one thing. Do you think there's going to be a real owner? What do you think about ownership in this range? Because I feel the same way about Ludwig.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I don't know. I don't think I have a great feel on it like I do some weeks because for whatever reason, I think Rory is there will be some percentage of people who say, oh, I can't back a guy after that collapse. There, whatever that is, 5%. I don't know what it is, but there's going to be some percentage of people. I think that Ludwig is probably 4th out of 4 here because you'll either spend up on Rory and Xander or you'll go down to Colin, who's been playing great golf. But I don't think I have a great feel for how this top part is going to shake out.
Yeah, so that might be something to pay attention to if there's projections. Because, I mean, even when you look at Ludwig, his ball striking has not slowed down. I mean, he gains 4 strokes every week to the field, just approaching the green. And driver is probably his biggest asset. He certainly has the distance to take advantage of a golf course like this. He's been generally a very good putter. I had a big hiccup at the Travelers on the greens, but you know, you can make the very same case for Morikawa that you can for Ludwig. Probably a little stronger with Morikawa, but there's a ton of upside with Ludwig Oberg here. And so I guess since I lean Rory and Xander pretty heavily in this amongst these 4, I would be willing to pivot if I felt there was a leverage play available. And if there's not, I'm sticking up top.
Yeah, we should be able to get an idea of that as the week goes on, and we'll get a better feel for what the industry's doing. But it does create a very interesting situation at the top of the board. The 9s are just as fun here. We've got Tommy Fleetwood at 9,900, Victor Hovland at 97, Tom Kim at 95. Then we rounded out with Hideki Matsuyama, Minwoo Lee, and Matt Fitzpatrick. So what do you do here, Greg?
Yeah, there's really kind of interesting options here as well. So one, and especially if you go down to Ludwig or Colin, I think going with Tommy Fleetwood is a very wise play. Right at 9,900, right at the top of the board. The finishes have been just so consistent, right? From T13 to T26 in his last 6 events since the Wells Fargo, it's been extremely consistent. His ball striking has been great. You know, it hasn't been Colin Morikawa kind of numbers, but it's a very similar looking profile. He seems to be gaining across the board every week. And he just hasn't had a spark yet to get him in contention the way Morikawa has. Tommy Fleetwood also has a very solid links golf record and has played well at the Renaissance Club. He's got a 2nd, a T4, a T6, another T26. And the T6 and T4 were when it was co-sanctioned PGA Tour. So I love the record here. I think his form absolutely warrants a play.
Yeah, he has just been basically a slightly worse Xander Schauffele. Just like a lot of really good finishes, gaining throughout the bag. Now he's got good course history as well. He's not as expensive. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned it because there might not be a path to Rory Tommy, but there's definitely a path to Colin Tommy.
Yeah. Yeah. Ludwig Tommy too.
Yeah.
Which again, going back to that leverage thing, if you feel like there's a little advantage to be had, I think it could be worth the risk to go Colin, especially if you compare him with Tommy right behind him. And if you can't get Tommy when you go Rory and feel comfortable with it, maybe that's another reason to drop off of Rory and Xander. Because I do think Tommy Fleetwood has a real chance of contending, and maybe you could get a 1-2 Colin Tommy in your top 2 for the tournament.
There you go. You heard it from Greg here first. The one that I'm fairly interested in is Hideki Matsuyama, and I understand that he just gives everybody fits. And the fact of the matter is that when he plays great. He's got an unbelievably high ceiling. Outside of this disastrous approach week at the Travelers, in which he still finished T23, he's still one of the best second shot players that we have. His short game, and I include the putting in that conversation, has been stellar. I think he is too cheap at $9,400.
I think there's a lot of evidence to support that, right? He's getting ready for a major, which he has a tendency of excelling in. The putting is a really strong asset here, right? It's a really nice, and what I like about this is it's not like Remember, Shane Lowry gained like 9 strokes putting at the PGA, and you're like, okay, was this? But what Hideki's done is, well, it's a half a stroke at the Masters. It's 2 strokes at the PGA. It's another stroke at the Memorial. It's 3 at the U.S. Open. It's quarter stroke at the Travelers. It's not on fire, but it gives you some belief that, hey, things are just getting better. You pair that with the short game, and it's pretty darn good.
Yeah, so that's where I'm looking at the 9K range at 9,400. But you mentioned Minwoo Lee. He has won this event before. Tom Kim has been playing better, and he's got great history. We think Victor Hovland might be on the upward trend. I mean, there are, if it's not Tommy, if it's not Hideki, there are other options that you could try to be maybe a little bit early on.
Yeah, and I think Tom Kim is a phenomenal option. He played the Rocket Mortgage Classic and missed the cut. He probably shouldn't have played that week.
Yeah.
Right. This was a lot of golf in a row for him. And it's been a lot of really good golf getting better. But, the thing is, so I basically wipe the Rocket Mortgage miscut. I wipe it out. I don't think it was disastrously bad. He missed the cut by a shot or two. And I don't think he should have played. What I really like is his history here. He's got a 3rd and a T6. And I think he's played well at the Open as well. Doesn't he have a 2nd at the Open?
Yeah, I remember he finished 2nd on the bum ankle, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. So he could be like a low-key links player, which in a tournament like this, where it's hard to really pinpoint statistically what is going to work, looking at links golf acumen is a great way to do it. And Tom Kim certainly seems to have it.
He's got 2 Open Championship starts, 47th and 2nd, and then 2 Scottish Open starts, 3rd and T6. So gaining in all 4 of those and 3 top 6 finishes during that.
Yeah, pretty darn good. And with his recent form, the ball striking that he's shown, it's hard for me to ignore that. Yeah. So I think for me, Tommy and Tom are my top 2 plays in this range.
Just start throwing as many Toms as you can into your lineups. Okay, let's truck on here. $8,000 range. Corey Connors leads the way. Justin Thomas, $8,800. Brian Harmon and Sung Jae Im. Then you get, we're sure we're going to spend some time on Aaron Rai at $8,300. Sahith Theegala at $82. Wyndham Clark and Jordan Spieth rounding out the rest of this range.
All right, this is kind of fascinating to me because I don't love this range. I really like Aaron Rai, which we can talk about in a minute. But I think this is a range to kind of sneak some guys in that are generally priced a lot lower than they normally would be. First and foremost, Justin Thomas. We got Tommy, we got Tom, now we got Thomas. I'm just so perplexed by Justin Thomas. And I just feel simply 8,800 is too cheap.
I've been so he has basically had great start, okay start, great start, bad start, great start, okay start. And I've been on the opposite side of all of them.
Okay, so are you fading this week? Because in that case I'll play.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sick enough to be very interested. I mean, Travelers was the stat profile that he put together. The Travelers was awesome. Gained nearly a stroke on approach per round. He has probably one of the best around the green games in the world. He has a big putter problem, but that's nothing new. But I agree with you. Like, there's not a lot of opportunities to get Justin Thomas at $8,800. That does not present itself frequently.
No. And, there's a reason why. It's like, why is it 10 handicapper a 10 handicapper? Yeah. There's a reason. So he's down here because, unfortunately, some of the play has been concerning, but I'm still seeing, 3 top 10 finishes in his last 6 or 7 starts.
Yeah, not to do like a drive-by on Will Zalatoris, but he hasn't been Will Zalatoris. Right. We'll get it. Like, he's very cheap as well, but we're coming off of T5 at a signature event. The last, like you said, last 5 or 6 events, he's got 3 top 10s. One of them was a major. The other 2 were signature event. Like he is not chopped liver right now.
No. And, I guess the one caveat would be I don't love his Open Championship record. Where T11's his best start, and after that it's like T41. I don't love his Scottish Open record. He does have a T8 here, but I feel like he should be a good links player, right? And he's not. But the possibility looms that he contends, and at 8,800, there could be a spot in your lineup for him.
Yeah, so I can't believe this Open Championship record.
It's surprising. It's very surprising. But I think there are 2 other players in this similar category here that they're priced too low. One of them is Wyndham Clark. One of them is Jordan Spieth. I mean, Wyndham had a little bit of a slow run after the RBC Heritage, but he did finish T9 at the Travelers. And I believe in his talent so much. And he's played pretty well here. He's got a T16 and a T25 here the last 2 years, which I think is pretty good. And I think his form is potentially rounding back into the Wyndham Clark, who is the second best player in the world earlier this summer. Now, you would be early on it, but I don't think you're completely just throwing your hat in the ring and guessing. I think there is a sign with his performance at the Travelers that there could be good things to come with a decent course history.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he hit it the best he has since the Players Championship. He putted it the best he has since the Players Championship. So there are signs that he might be on the up and up. Now, you're going to have to do probably a little bit more convincing on Jordan Spieth for me. I did indeed see what he did on Saturday at the John Deere. I did also indeed see what he did on Sunday and at the Travelers and a lot of weeks prior. So I'm going to need a little bit more on Jordan here.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, links works with Jordan. Okay. So you got to understand, I'm coming into this wanting it to work for Jordan. I'm also looking at that links record, and I'm looking at a price tag of $8,000, and I'm saying, okay, this could be worth it. Now, the other positive sign is at both the U.S. Open and the John Deere Classic, we see gains in strokes gained approach, which is the biggest thing that I'm worried about with Jordan. It was loss after loss after loss. And all of a sudden he gains 5.9 strokes at the U.S. Open, loses 1 at the Travelers, gains another 2 at the John Deere Classic. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe he's figuring something out. Maybe I'm wrong about the wrist. Maybe there is a possibility of some really good golf out of Jordan, and maybe links golf is the pathway for him. So I'm not head over heels on this one. I certainly don't. I'm not jumping, but it could be a chance to maybe be early on Jordan at a very affordable price.
Yeah, the last time he was this cheap in a non-major, majors always kind of get softened up a little bit, or small fields get softened up. Yeah, you're looking at, a full field $8,000 Jordan Spieth was still scrolling. That's a small field. It's been a while. Okay. It's a long time. I'm back in 2021 and I can only find it in, okay. Phoenix of 2021.
Oh, and he was playing bad. Yeah. He's at least he's making cuts now, right? It's disappointing. But he's driving it great, and maybe there could be a little spark here. I don't know. If we get 2 out of the last 3 weeks, we get a little uptick in his iron play, and even the other weeks are surrounding that where he has lost strokes approaching the green. It hasn't been as disastrous as it was at, say, the Wells Fargo. So maybe he's turning a corner. Maybe links golf brings out the best in Jordan again.
Let's wrap up this conversation of the 8K range with Aaron Rai, who has turned into an excellent golfer who has piled up top 20s, piled up top 10s, and was in the final group in each of his last 2 starts at the John Deere and the Rocket Mortgage Classic. And now, Greg, he goes back to the Scottish Open, where he has one of his 2 DP World Tour victories.
Yes, very curious about this. Very curious. So first and foremost, he's hitting the ball well enough to play him any week, anywhere. I think that's pretty clear. What he's done with his ball striking this year is absolutely phenomenal. Like you were saying, Fleetwood is a not quite as good Xander. Well, Aaron Rai has been like a not quite as good Scheffler. I mean, there's a big separation there, but the pattern is the same. Every week he gains strokes off the tee and approaching the green. He gains strokes ball striking every week. He lost a half a stroke at the Valspar, 3/4 of a shot in Phoenix, and that's it for the whole year. Right? It's very impressive, and now it seems like he's figured something out on the greens. And I think the work with John Graham has clearly paid off. From a guy that was very inconsistent and losing strokes on the greens, all of a sudden he gains 2.8 at the U.S. Open, 4.8 at the Rocket Mortgage, 8.9 last week at the John Deere Classic. But now we're changing green surfaces, and it's a pretty significant change. Much slower greens, much different putting performance. Will that work on green reading transfer? It's a big question for me. But like I said, he's hitting the ball well enough to be a play any week, anytime.
Yeah, I know that probably each of the last 2 weeks on Sunday, you were disappointed with Aaron Rai. But if you have been backing him in the last 2 months, you have come out very happy, and you should not be stopping now. I mean, at least one more go. At least now back at the place where he's won, as he's now a transformational putter and still a great. You just run him out one more time and see what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, even before like the last 2 weeks, you're getting a T19 at the U.S. Open, T14 at the Canadian Open, T32 at the Charles Schwab Challenge. We're talking about $8,300 here, right? If you get a T25 out of him and he doesn't putt the eyes out of it like he did last week, you'd be fine with that.
Yeah, I'm sure this will come back to bite me, but it's pretty unlikely that Aaron Rai burns you.
It's very unlikely. And now you're starting to see the likelihood that he can make your lineup, right? He's shown in the last 2 weeks he could be a centerpiece, which is pretty cool.
Pretty cool indeed. And what's going to be even cooler is when we get down to the 7K range, the 6s and the 5s, which we are going to do after a quick word from our partners.
Lord, disaster! Mark number 1, high speeds across the board. Time has come to decide the top team of the year. The battle is on.
And we're back. Now, the 7K range. We are still mostly in PGA Tour players that we see on a regular basis. So that starts with Davis Thompson, Robert McIntyre, Max Homa. The middle is Christian Bezuidenhout and Siwoo Kim. And the bottom of the range is Billy Horschel, Tom Hoagie, EVR, and then you get a little bit of Ryan Fox, Tom McKibben as kind of the start of the guys who primarily play on the DP World Tour. So, Greg, let's start here and see what we can find.
Yeah, so some great options. Obviously, Davis Thompson coming off his big win yesterday. It looks extremely impressive. I'm not sure about his acumen in links golf, so I'm probably going to apply my rule, which has been shattered, which is you don't pick the winner from the previous week and you don't pick defending champions. I think that rule is gone, but I'm going to follow it here with Davis Thompson.
Scotty single-handedly, I think, ruined both of those.
Yes.
The other thing is, again, I know you shouldn't view it this way because it attaches yourself almost personally to golfers, but it's not like a Tony Finau situation where you have played or bet Tony Finau every single week and he finally snaps through. If you were in on Davis Thompson at any point in basically his career when you should have been, you've done very, very well. You do not need to back this up with a post-win. How is he going to react to it? Let's take him to a completely different continent and change I don't need to double down on what was a great week last week. I'll catch up with Davis Thompson at the 3M and in the playoffs and all this other stuff that I'm very excited for him at.
Yeah, season long again next year, right? You love that. Yeah. But right, I just don't think there's a need to go there. Especially when Robert McIntyre is sitting right below him, who is completely unpredictable. I never play him ever. And because he's kind of hard to figure out, but so is Links Golf. And Robert McIntyre knows how to play Links Golf. He had a phenomenal go of it here last year, battling Rory McIlroy, hitting the forgotten shot of the year, probably on the 18th hole. So he has a second. He missed the cut in 22, but as a T18 in 21 and 20 as well. In 20 it was a T14. So he's got 3 really solid starts here. And I think that he's got to be pretty happy with his play this year, even though there's been a little bit of inconsistency with 2 missed cuts after the Canadian Open.
Yeah, and I was looking up. I mean, he's played a lot of rounds in Scotland, as you can imagine, because he's Scottish, but he's played well. He's usually pretty good at home. And then there are some of these guys, Greg, where you have to remember, I mean, we haven't seen Christian Bezuidenhout since the Travelers Championship. Haven't seen Siwoo Kim since the Travelers Championship. And specifically in terms of Bezuidenhout, he's still playing great golf. You know, a 23rd at the Travelers, a top 35 at the U.S. Open, and then all those good finishes prior to that. I mean, I'm just trying to recalibrate everybody's brains into some of these guys we haven't seen in 3 weeks. Yeah,
Christian is definitely worth it. He has been phenomenal on the greens. He's been very solid with his ball striking. It hasn't quite been what it was earlier in the year. He also has a pretty good record here, you know, some respectable starts. I would say with Seabez, I'm not really looking at a win or any outrights, but if I'm going to go with the crazy risk of Jordan Spieth up in the 8K range, I may pair that with, you know, a little safety in a Christian Bezuidenhout. He kind of has that feel of Aaron Rai, where it's unlikely that you get burned by Seabez, completely burned.
Now, you have made a point to kind of grab some guys who are historically underpriced. There is a big discount and a sale going on right now on Max Homa. Could I entice you to get involved?
No. No. Rick, I'm very concerned with his driver.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, there's a chance that they got that straightened out, but that's problematic. Even though it's a golf course where you can get away with a little bit of errancy, if you're just fighting it off the tee, it's not fun to play. And Max Homa has not made his career driving the golf ball like this. So it gives me a little too much concern. I'd love to be wrong on this and wish that I played Max Homa, but I can't back up this driving performance that we've seen from him all the way back to the RBC Heritage. I mean, he's lost strokes off the tee every week since the RBC Heritage.
Yep. And that used to be a strength of his.
Right. I mean, a lock it down kind of strength. So I can't back that up. I just think he's fighting something in his golf swing. Now, the opposite of that, Ben On, who's right below him, missed the cut at the U.S. Open. Before that was playing phenomenal golf and has both seemingly the driver and the irons on complete lockdown. Now, putting, we saw some struggles at the U.S. Open, but even before that, it was a little better. We saw some struggles back around the RBC Heritage and, back in April. But I think Ben On is a very good play here. Because, the other thing that you mentioned, Rick, this isn't Pinehurst, right? These greens are a lot slower, and this is the kind of player who can benefit from that. It also doesn't hurt that he came and tied third here last year.
That does help. I will circle back on Max Homa for just 1 second because I agree with you. I cannot imagine myself having much exposure to Max Homa. However, if you've been following the trend of Toms, you get Tommy Fleetwood, Tom Kim, Justin Thomas, and Max Homa, spelled Homa, are the same letters of how you would spell Thomas. Thomas would obviously be Thomas. So you could still go that route if you wanted to.
Well, how about this, Rick? I got a better option for you along those lines in the 7K range.
Thomas Dietrich.
Thomas Dietrich. Okay. I'm not kidding. I actually Dietrich, Hoagie, McKibben. I was making my list. I didn't even realize this. I got Tommy Fleetwood, Tom Kim, Justin Thomas, Thomas Dietrich, Tom Hoagie, Tom McKibben.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there's another Tom, but that's hysterical.
Yeah, we'll find it if there is.
Yeah. Thomas Dietrich is having a heck of a year. Okay, T4 at the PGA. He was tied second in Houston, tied fourth at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. He's put up some really good tournaments, and he's played really well at the Renaissance Club quite often as well. Tied second in 2021, tied 10th in 2022, and tied 42nd last year. You know, again, this is along the Robert McIntyre lines. Maybe a little unpredictable player, a little unpredictable golf course. I think it could be a great mix. He did finish T14 at the U.S. Open as well.
I'll grab the other two Toms real quick, Hoagie and McKibben, and I'll start with McKibben here because this is where we begin to get into the DP World Tour golfers. And McKibben did play the U.S. Open. He finished T41, but before that, the last time he played on a PGA Tour sanctioned event was this event last year, the Scottish Open. He finished T35, but in between then and now, I mean, he's a very, very good golfer on the World Tour. His last two starts, runner-up in Italy, 6th at the KLM Open. He's got 3 top 8s in his last 4. He's got 5 top 25s in his last 6. So it is not just the name, it's the game as well, Greg.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating comparison. Like as we get down into this range, especially if you're looking on rickrungood.com, you're going to see a lot of green. You're going to see a lot of guys playing really well. And while it's a top-heavy field, if you're looking at world ranking points, the guys that are filling out this bottom portion of the field, the players from the DP World Tour, many of them are playing some great golf on their respective tour. And I think that creates a really interesting mix. And McKibben definitely is the leader of the pack from that DP World Tour side. And at $7,000, he deserves a good look.
Here's the Hoagie profile, who is doing a lot of just Tom Hoagie stuff, which is gaining a ton of strokes ball striking and then being a little bit more all over the place at the short game category. So this is one that popped up on your list, Greg. I'm pretty neutral on Hoagie for this week.
Yeah, I tend to be as well, but I'm looking at T3 at the Travelers. He's been exactly what you expect out of Tom Hoagie, and I love that aspect. But he did finish T19 here last year. So, and he has a miscut as well. And I'm wondering, hey, maybe there's a little life on the links for Tom Hoagie. It's just so hard for me week in and week out to ignore that iron play that he always puts together. And I think there's a chance, especially if he gets a good draw, if he gets some lighter winds than expected, Hoagie could do really well on this course with the slower greens, especially.
Okay, now that 7K range does start to transition down here to the 6s, where you start to get a lot more of the international players, the guys whose home tour is not necessarily that of the PGA, though we do start with a couple of familiar names in Matthew Pavone, Will Zalatoris at 6,900, 65, the middle of this range, Bernd Wiesberger, Jordan L. Smith, get a little bit of Austin Eckroat, and then if you go down to $6,000 even, that would get you Guido Migliozzi, Andrew Putnam, and then plenty of others, Greg. So can we find some diamonds down here at the bottom of the board?
Yeah, we'll just kind of work through these in order because there's a lot of playable options here. First of all, Matthew Pavone, I think, is a very solid option at 6,900.
Is he just back? Like he just took like a little mid-season break?
Well, you get fifth at the U.S. Open. And you think about the way that he played that, a lot of on the ground play around the greens. That was phenomenal. And then T16 at the Travelers. I think he might just be back, Rick. And we saw what we saw earlier in the year. It just shows you the upside of a Matthew Pavone, and now seeing a little, a little step back in that direction. I mean, you could argue the U.S. Open's a big step back in that direction. It's the U.S. Open. But seeing a stride going forward and seeing him under $7,000 is really hard for me to ignore.
Yeah, he caught my attention too. Okay.
All right. So these two I got to ask you about. The Højgaards.
Yeah.
They catch my interest in a big way. Because they're twins. They're both 6,800. One's been playing on the DP World Tour. One's been playing on the PGA Tour. The record looks pretty darn good for Rasmus, who's been on the DP World Tour. I mean, he at the Volvo Car Scandinavian Mixed, he gained 10 strokes approaching the green. Mm-hmm. Finished T20, albeit. But then he finished T4 at the KLM Open. So, that's attractive. And then you look at Nicolai, whose results haven't been great, but his iron play really seems to be kind of turning back to what it was around the beginning of the year, the kind of play that got him in contention at the Farmers and at the Masters as well. So I'm thinking there could be something turning in the right direction for Nicolai, who's had a little bit of a tough stretch.
Yeah, this is a fun one because like you said, they're brothers, they're twins, they're the same price. One has been playing on the better tour, but playing probably below average, and one has been playing on a secondary tour, DP World Tour, but playing much better. And now it's like, well, wait a minute, like which one outweighs the other one?
Yeah.
I like the Rasmus side of things. I like the guy who's playing with confidence, who's playing well, who's hitting it well. We've got the stats to back that up. And I also think that there's a big difference between being a DP World Tour player and traveling to America to play in a just like straight up PGA Tour event versus being a DP World Tour player and having them come to you in a co-sanctioned event where half the field is guys that you beat up on every single week. I think that feels a lot different. So I ride with Rasmus.
I think you're right. And I think Rasmus is very playable at 6,800 as well. Yeah. And I tend to think that the home game, I'm much easier on the DP World Tour guys. I'm much more willing and excited to play them in this event than I would be if they were coming over to play in the 3M Open or something like that.
The beginning of the year, they come over and they play the Honda or the Cognizant. And it's like, oh man, it's like sometimes they get eaten alive that first couple weeks.
Yeah, they've been playing great golf on the DP World Tour, but it's a big trip, a big adjustment. And this, I don't feel the same way in this one. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, let's continue here. Where else are we going here in the sixes?
Okay. Also in the sixes, Bernd Wiesberger. Been playing a lot of golf on the DP World Tour. Been playing a lot of very good golf. He's won here. I think he shot 61 when he won at the Renaissance Club. First year it was played here.
I think that's right. I think I remember that. Yeah, I think that's right.
I mean, this guy has, in his last 5 events, he's gained at least 4 strokes approaching the green. And now that is on the DP World Tour, but you're seeing the results match that up. There, 3 out of those 4, or 4 out of those 5 are top 25 finishes, including a tied 2nd at the European Open, tied 7th at the KLM Open, 16th at the BMW International. I think this is a player right now with a lot of confidence going back to a place he's won.
$6,600 is the price tag for Bernd Wiesberger. Shall we go deeper?
Let's go deeper.
Okay.
We don't have to spend a lot of time here. I think you could play Ricky Fowler at 6,400. Now, I would not play Ricky Fowler, Justin Thomas, and Jordan Spieth together. I just don't think you could do that. But if you're a little worried about taking a chance on Spieth, I get it. If you're worried about taking a chance on Ricky, I get it as well. But at the Rocket Mortgage Classic, he did play some better golf. He played better golf at the Travelers. You see him gain strokes approaching the green in his last 2, the putter in his last 3. Although it's minor, he's also played some pretty good links golf in his day.
He has.
And this could be, it's not a disaster what we saw the last 2 weeks. And I think this could be a kind of change going across the pond, as they say, where you could see get a Ricky Fowler sighting. And you only need a top 25 would be great. He's capable of that at 6,400.
Yeah, you don't need much. You don't need much for Andrew Novak, who's 6,200, who has now gone 14th, 20th, 7th. He gave us exactly what we wanted, Greg. We said match the iron play in Canada with the putting in Detroit, and he did exactly that. T7 at John Deere.
It's just awesome stuff. He's playing so good. Now it's a big change, which is why I think 6,200 is fair on him. I don't think it's necessarily a steal, but it's certainly worth the risk. How about one other guy? Maybe 2 other. We don't have to spend a ton of time on them, but they're worth looking at. Sebastian Soderberg.
Yeah.
May take a little more looking into why he withdrew from the KLM Open.
Yeah, because he played at least a round. So he either withdrew during the second round or between rounds, because he played 1 round, he lost a stroke and withdrew. That was right after he coughed it up at the Scandinavian mixed, which stumped up. But the rest of this, I mean, the zoom out, the years of as the whole has been great.
It's been great. Top 10 contention, second. I mean, 3 second place finishes since March, with a third in there as well. So I think that's definitely worth a look. And also right below him at 6,300, Kita Nakajima.
Yeah,
I think is also interesting. He played very good golf, hit the ball very well the last 2 weeks. His last 2 starts, European Open, he came in 6th, tied 20th at the BMW International, and he also won the Hero Indian Open back in March as well. So having a pretty good year.
Yeah, so he missed the cut at the PGA Championship. So his last 4 DP World Tour starts are T20, 6th, T11, and a win, which is about as good as you can get. Okay, well, that leads us to the 5s, which has Davis Riley at the top, Matty Schmid, Max Grazerman, the middle of the 5K range, Hao Tong Lee, Gary Woodland, the bottom, the mid-price golfers, Oliver Wilson, Marcus Armitage.
This range is slim pickings. I like that it's here. It gives us some flexibility. It's a little slim pickings. So first and foremost, Rick, I think at 5,900 are our 2 best options. And that would be 1, Matty Schmid, who we talked a lot about earlier in the year. And then he missed 4 cuts in a row.
Yeah.
And I think he's come back from that.
Yeah, he's getting back. Yeah.
Right. T15 at the KLM Open, T52 at the Rocket Mortgage, T32 at the BMW International Open. The putter seems to be coming back. I think Matty Schmid is very playable and very talented. Also at 5,900 is Matthew Jordan, who he's missed his last 2 cuts, but his ball striking has been phenomenal. I had a really hard time putting at the Italian Open and the BMW International. But before that, you get a T12 at the Scandinavian Mix, T13 at the European Open, T5 at the Sudal Open, gaining strokes basically across the board in all of them. And the reason that he misses these 2 cuts is because of poor putting, quite simply. I think you can play Matthew Jordan here as well.
Yeah, I like that one. That's one I probably was not going to look at. The deepest I went was, I think, 5,600. Julien Gourrier. I think he's French. So 13th at the International Open, 22nd at the Italian Open, 20th at the Scandinavian Mix, T4 at the European Open. Those are his last 4 sets, and just green on green on green on green on green.
Yeah, it's a good one. And at 5,600, it's a really good one.
I mean, come on, just make the cut.
I had I think that's very playable. I had a hard time getting below 5,900, but I knew we want to go a little deeper into this range. So like, how low would you go? And I found this pretty interesting. I got to just find him here. I think it was it wasn't. I thought it was at 5,300. Maybe it's a little higher. Matteo Manacero.
Oh, where's he at?
Oh, he's 5,700. Okay, so I'm not quite as low as you. I actually like Julian better here. But we got a T7 at the KLM Open, T10 at the Italian Open, T47 at the BMW International. He won earlier in the year in March as well. Yeah. T5 at the Hero Indian Open. Been some pretty good ball striking out of him. I mean, if you need to, you could go down here to him.
Yeah, we are in the abyss right now. We are deep down the board in this field. So I wish you the best of luck if you have to get down here and throw some darts, but it ain't the prettiest thing in the world, Greg.
Yeah. Beneath Julian, you're throwing darts.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? This is fun couple of weeks here.
It's fun. Look, this is a challenge to predict. I would just recommend, as you're making your final decisions, because we mentioned a lot of names here, take a look at Link's golf acumen. I think that's really important. I do think recent form is important as well, but sometimes you can get a flip of a switch when you change golf courses and change styles so dramatically. So that's just another thing to keep in mind.
I agree with that. Drastic change this week, but not for the First Cut Pod, because we'll be rocking and rolling just as usual. Tuesday Mega Pod and round by round recaps. I believe the Friday show will be live on CBS Sports Network and will serve as the recap because the times are actually now going to sync up, which will be nice. So that'll be cool. But otherwise, big thanks to producer Troy. He does all the hard work behind the scenes. That right there, it's Greg DuCharme. You can find him on Twitter at @TheRealGFD, and you can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.